Welcome to the School of Hospitality Administration and our continuing programming for a year-long celebration of our 40th anniversary. As many of you might know, I'm Leora Lanz. I'm Assistant Dean of Academic Affairs, undergraduate and graduate program here. I'm chair of our graduate program, and I'm very, very pleased to welcome you for what is a very special hour that we're going to have ahead of us. Now it's my pleasure to officially welcome Patty Simpson, Chief People Officer of Union Square Hospitality Group, who has been here for the last 24 hours plus as our semester executive in residence, visiting our classes. Some of you might have been in Dr. Payton's HR class or in Barry Barth's Hospitality Law class. And she is joined here today by Richard Corain, founding partner of Union Square Hospitality Group. I'm now going to turn it over to Dean of Major because we really want to hear from these folks and not from me. So, Dean of Major, take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lanz. And Patty and Richard, thank you for being with us today, yesterday, and weeks and months of planning for the Executive in Residence program as well as the graduate students trip to New York City, where we are taking, like Professor Lanz said, 30 of our students. They'll be spending 3 days at Union Square Hospitality headquarters. I know that I speak on behalf of everyone at SHA when I say that we have long admired the work of Union Square Hospitality Group and your philosophy of Enlightened Hospitality. In fact, we teach it to our students, undergraduates as well, all the way in the graduate program. And all of this culminated in 2021 when we awarded our most prestigious Icon of the Industry award to Danny Meyer. And that's what forged the bond between our organizations. And that's what is bringing us here today, and hopefully for a long time to come. So with that, a warm welcome to both of you.
Thank you very much.
So we often start these conversations with getting to know you better and to learn about your journey. So tell us, how did you get started? I know both of you are Boston native. So let's start with Patty.
My journey. Well, I was born and raised in Philadelphia. My family was from the Boston area. I've spent time here in 2 different restaurant segments, one with Fridays back in the days when we were open TGI Fridays in Norwell and Danvers, and then not long ago with Au Bon Pain, who was located in the seaport here. My journey is as circuitous as it can be. I never had that straight line that said, I'm going to end up as Chief People Officer at the end of this. But I always knew I had to do something with people, and I love operations. The buzz of nothing delights me more than being in a restaurant that's busy where you can hear the noise and feel the buzz in the atmosphere. So providing our people with the opportunity to do their best work has always been a passion for me, and I ended up in the place where nobody does it better. So,
Fantastic. Richard.
My journey actually started close to here in Lynn, Massachusetts, where I was born. The hospital I was born in is now a Stop and Shop, which shows how my journey has evolved. But I never chose this as my path early on. I came to it, and it was because of my mom, who every day said, you'll find it, it's out there, something will come to you. Which was the opposite of my sister, who, like Patty said, my sister had figured out what she wanted to be when she wanted to be it at every point in her life, and she did that. I was not that person, and it's a lot like taking Waze if you're on your car. You will put in a journey, a destination, and it'll give you 3 routes you can take. My sister took New York to Hartford or New York to New Haven straight away. Nothing was going to stop her. The middle road really wasn't appropriate for me because I wanted to sort of experience things, so I took that 3rd route, which takes you about 3 hours to get to New Haven. But along that journey, I've been the beneficiary of working with the most talented people you could ever imagine. I've learned from them, I've been mentored by them. But what really got me into this business was my uncle, who was in charge of dining at the White House for President Kennedy. And so when I was very young, I used to hear stories about state dinners and people in tuxedos. And when it really came time for me to decide what I wanted to do, I wasn't going to be an airline pilot like my dad. But I knew that there was something exciting about this industry, so I started to do small jobs in the industry, which led to where I am today.
So Philadelphia and Massachusetts, but last night when we were sitting at dinner, a lot of students around me they were all fascinated with New York City. And you know, there is that old Frank Sinatra song, if I can make it there, I can make it anywhere. So did you also, growing up, had that fascination that you got to, you know, go into New York City?
Totally. And again, the non-circuitous journey for me was my first interview, and I was telling Denise here, was at the Sheraton Boston Hotel sometime around 1981, which dates me in this conversation for sure. But I was offered a job in the Sheraton Corporate Training Program in Leora, and I talked about this. And they said, look, you went to the Culinary Institute and you went to the University of New Hampshire School of Business. Tell us where you'd like to do your first placement in the company. And for some reason I said Hawaii. I don't know why, I might have been watching Tom Selleck or Hawaii Five-0 or something, and I said, that's where I want to be. And so they said, great, you'll report to Honolulu, the Sheraton Royal Hawaiian, right after Labor Day. And so I took the summer off, and I went for a run sometime around August 15th, and I got back to my house, and for some reason I said, what are you, crazy? Why are you going to Hawaii? And so I answered that question. I said, I have to go to New York because that's where you go if you want to be great at something. So I called my director from Sheraton and I said, I don't want to go to Hawaii. And he said, where do you want to go? And I said, New York City. So off I went to what is now the Sheraton New York, formerly the Sheraton Center, and that's where I answered that question for myself.
And you did reach New York, and you did make it. So how about you, Patty? Did you have dreams of New York City?
I can't say that I had dreams of New York City. I just had dreams of the next great thing. Whatever that was, I spent a lot of time in New York. I lived for a year in the Penta Hotel. Now it's the Pennsylvania Hotel across from Penn Station, opening Fridays around the city in New York, 1980 or 8 or something. So I've been in now the city throughout, you know, from Philly. That's where you go on your 6th grade field trip. It's close enough that it's part of how we grow up. But I traveled all around the world with the positions I've had. I've been really fortunate. I love New York. I have a passion for New York now more than ever because we went through COVID together. And whether you were born there or showed up there or just got there, you couldn't help but like tear up when people were standing out and clapping for the first responders and making it, family happened in New York. And when you're in the city now, it's completely different. I was telling the students last night, this city with all of the new outdoor dining areas and people have put lights and they've just turned into this place where there's less traffic, less cars, more people outside, and it's a special place now. I think maybe more special than I've ever seen it.
Yeah, so that outdoor dining, is that continuing? Do you think that's going to continue for a long time?
Yeah.
And the industry needs that.
Yeah.
It was the oxygen that the industry needed when it needed it during COVID.
It's going to turn New York City into a little bit more livable, a little more friendlier right now. Otherwise, it's just a big mass of traffic that, you know.
Well, you know, the other thing is people generally don't move to New York City to stay in their apartments.
Right.
So being outside and being able to eat outside is an advantage now for living in New York City.
So how did you get started in restaurants?
I'm going to date myself. In high school, I got a job at a Sears coffee house. None of you will know what it is. You do, Dean, thank you. Assistant Dean. So I worked there because it was right across the street from the high school. And you learned how to make everything. You had to make eggs, because it was really feeding the people that worked in this big Sears store. So automotive came in first, and then came the salespeople at the candy counter. And you learned everything because there was this small cadre of women from Philadelphia that would take the bus out. They made all the food. Like, I remember my first Jell-O experience. Remember you get the Jell-O in that little cup? Well, I didn't know that you had to cut it into cubes so it came out correctly, so I was just scooping that out. We used a lot of whipped cream to cover those mistakes. But I started there, and when I graduated from college with a teaching degree, I couldn't get a real teaching job. So I went into Bloomingdale's was opening in the King of Prussia Mall. So I went into the restaurants there, and they had 3 restaurants. They had La Trembleu, which is a very high fine dining restaurant with gold leaf on the wall. I've never seen gold leaf like wasted that way, but it was great. And then there was another La Provence, which was a middle casual dining, and I worked there. It's my first full service waitress position. Someone there told me, hey, they're hiring at TGI Fridays, new concept. And I went there, got a job, and I was hooked. And it was always, this is my message to everyone, it was until I get my real job. And it became my real job, and it's okay to choose this as your real job, because it's awesome. Like, there's nothing better than finding a place that fits for you. So I started TGI Fridays. I worked internationally for many years, traveled around the world, and I've been lucky to find like a right home for me at the right time for me throughout my career.
I love that. This is the real job. So
Start here and stay. That's my new mantra. Because you don't have to go somewhere else. Like, there's everything you want in a job you can find in our industry.
So RC, how did you get started? I know when you initially met, how did you meet Danny Meyer, and was there like instant synergy because you co-founded it with him and it's become such a big empire now?
There was, over a 48-hour period, there was instant synergy. And I had known Danny for a number of years when I worked in California for Wolfgang Puck. So we were professional friends first. We sort of blurred that into semi-professional friends. We would call each other on each coast and commiserate with problems we were trying to solve. And I'd say, how do you do it? And he'd say, how do you do it? When he would come to California, we would get together, the same when I would come to New York. And then in 1995, he called me and said, look, I'm thinking of doing something other than restaurants, ... Would you come to New York and spend a weekend with me and just talk through things? I like how you think, and I have a lot of respect for you. So over 48 hours, I came to New York, and the first day we spent just walking around both of his restaurants, Union Square Cafe and Gramercy Tavern. He asked me questions, and I gave him some insights, and then we had dinner. And then the next day, we took a walk through Union Square. And we started talking about things other than the industry. We talked about where we grew up and how we grew up, and that led to baseball and TV. We were born within 30 days of each other. So we had a lot of commonalities that bonded us there. And so it was in an odd way almost like talking to a family person that you just didn't know was family. And then finally, I said, so what is it you're trying to do? And he said, well, one thing is that I really know is I want to start the greatest hospitality company ever created. That was enough for me right there. But then he started going through these crazy ideas of things that he wanted to do. So take yourself back to 1995, and Danny's saying, why couldn't you take a large space and put little food vendors in each space and maybe have, different types of experiences, or a florist or whatever? Those things are now known as food halls. And he said, and why is it that food in sports stadiums so bad? Why couldn't somebody do better food in sports stadiums? That happens on a regular basis now. There's a crazy idea for an all-turkey restaurant, which didn't really make it. But there were things that he kept saying, and I said, this is amazing. I want to be part of that. So I literally said, I'm your guy. And I made one promise to him. I said, I'm going to move to New York from California. Everybody that I knew thought I was crazy coming from that way to New York. And I said, we're going to do this, and wherever it goes, whatever it takes, I'm going to do it. And so I've had about a dozen roles in this company, but it's been quite a journey.
It has been amazing, and truly he has created a world-class, and of course going back to New York was coming back home to you. That was your first job. So Patty, how about you? You worked, like you said, with TGI Fridays and Ruby Tuesdays and Ovo Pan. So how was your first encounter? Tell us the backstory of how did you start working for Union Square, and obviously as the chief people officer, you probably did a lot of investigating and background testing, and obviously the company passed all your tests. So tell us about your introduction to the company.
All right, so I have to say, when I was interviewing, my kids were so excited about this job that I was worried about passing their test. My son said, "If you blow this," I'm like, "Okay, all right." But I had been working in jobs where I was working to shrink businesses, and I became very good at it. Aaron here from Aubon Palm, when I was here, we were having to shrink that business along the way. I see John Gaffney here from Marsh, formerly Marsh. We did a lot of work to try and make businesses healthier because, you know, you always have to respond to the world you're living in. And I started doing a lot of that work and did it at Ruby Tuesday and became tired with letting people go. So when we did Ruby Tuesday, we made some changes there. I left, and I had, you know, a year severance to kind of hang out. So I was sitting on my computer one day and thought, I wonder what Chip Wade's up to. Now, Chip and I worked 25 years ago, side by side. I was international, he was domestic, but we shared a boss. And I didn't even have a cell phone, like we were not that close. So I just emailed him on LinkedIn and said, hey, I'm starting my journey. Let me know if you know of anything that's coming up. And 10 minutes later, he called me and said, I'm looking for a head of HR. And that's how I ended up starting the interview process. I think I had 16 interviews. I don't do that anymore now that I'm here.
I wish it was that few.
Yeah, it might have been 20,
Yeah.
but and I knew I was home right away. I knew I was home when I talked to Chip. I knew I was home when I met the team. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great because I won't have to let people go. And then COVID came. And we had to let everybody go. We became the best unemployer, as I've said to some of the people in the business when we were hit with COVID. So that's how I got here. This will be my last job. I can't see me working anywhere else, and I'm so excited. And if you have worked with me, as Aaron in the back, I try and take people with me along the way. And I know Steph is on this video watching. Steph Russo, just newly Chief People Officer at BPNE here in Boston, and all the people that might be watching. There's so much growth. Wherever you go, just have some fun and come work with us.
Yeah. Could I just have 2 minutes on,
Sure.
on one of the great leadership lessons or one of the great leadership experiences I've ever seen? And it relates to Patty. Picture yourself joining the Danny Meyer company. Picture yourself being in the company for how long?
8 weeks.
8 weeks. And then all of a sudden, before you even get to meet the entire company, COVID hits. So, so let me take you to a boardroom where the C-suite is meeting, led by Danny, trying to figure out what the heck we do right now. And as we're going around, everybody's sort of saying, we don't know what's happening, we don't know where this is going to go, but it's serious. And Patty, who's new and doesn't even know everybody yet, gently kicks me under the table and whispers in my ear, we need to close every restaurant. And I said, you're right, say that. And Patty, being the diplomat that she is and was, held her tongue. We start going around about another 15 minutes. She kicks me a little harder and says, we need to close every restaurant. It's the only safe thing to do. And I kick her back.
I really did.
And I said, Patty needs to be heard right now. Patty got up the courage to say, if safety matters more than anything, we have to close all of our businesses starting as soon as this meeting ends. So when you talk about times and places for leadership, put yourself in Patty's shoes being new and making a courageous and proper suggestion, almost mandate with that. But then having reached that agreement with everybody, she then leads an entire company from 3,200 employees to 48 in a matter of 21 days or so, and then restructures the whole company over the next 6 months. So I know we do a lot of studying of leadership and what it takes to be a great leader. But I have to say that's one of the great leadership moments I've ever witnessed in my life.
So kind, Richard. You don't get to make those decisions unless you walk into a room without a little person in you. You got to go with the big person when you get to the room. And that was a room, there was a lot of trust. Danny engenders trust in everyone so that I never lost my voice again in the room. I just so you know, it's all good now. You never have to kick me again. It's a great place of trust. So thank you for that testimony.
But the big lesson is there are titles in the world, and there are people that do things. Her title is what it is, but she casts a much bigger shadow and impact than what her title says.
Thank you.
You know, that's true leadership. You just cannot, you know, in a big bureaucracy, in big organizations, you know, you have a lot of systems in place and processes in place, and often people will sort of hide behind those processes and you know, other people and other things. But to find the courage to actually say, okay, this is the right thing to do, and this is what we are going to do, and to have an organization that actually backs you up, that is absolutely incredible. So thank you for sharing that story, RC, and thank you for that. So that brings me back to the organization and the corporate philosophy of Enlightened Hospitality. So our students read first about that from Setting the Table, and that book is right there, Transforming Power of Hospitality in Business. So I want to ask you, from your perspective, what does Enlightened Hospitality mean, and how do you put that into practice in your own areas?
It means putting people first. It's a cycle. The virtuous cycle of hospitality starts with a different philosophy than many companies take. Ours takes this philosophy that everyone matters, but we start with the employee mattering first. And we take care of each other first. And then those people that are happy because we're taking care of each other take care of the guests. They take care of the community. They take care of our suppliers and our vendors, who then, that leads to great wealth for our stakeholders, and it just goes around. Because if your stakeholders are happy, then your employees are happy because you have more money to pay, and it just goes in that cycle. Some businesses, you've seen them, they start with the stakeholder of your profit as the most important thing, and that isn't how we go. That company looks like everyone looking up at what is the number today, how are we trying to get to the bottom line. We don't believe that that's how you make do your best work. You do your best work when people feel free to do it, that they're happy doing it, and they know where we're going. We want to offer hospitality. That's it. It's simple. If you ask Danny what he was trying to do, I might have mentioned this yesterday, 36 years ago, he was trying to make a good bowl of risotto. That was it. And look where we are now. And it has to be that simple to us, that people come first, we work that cycle, and we hire people that think like we do about that. And that's a virtuous cycle. And that is Enlightened Hospitality. And we want to extend it anywhere we can.
Yeah, very, very clearly and succinctly said. But for me, it's, first of all, hospitality is a team sport, and you need everybody on your team believing that this mission, which, if you distill it down, it's a combination of working really hard and being nice to people. That's as scientific as I can get about this. If you work hard, you're going to achieve things, because you're not going to settle for mediocrity. You're going to be allergic to mediocrity. You're going to keep trying harder and harder to be better at something. That's a good thing. Being nice to people, and in this sort of basket of kindness, compassion, generosity, appreciation, for me, I believe that one size fits one in this world. And you're not me and I'm not you, but together we can be something. But I can't do that unless you're the best you can be. And you need for me to be the best me I can be. But if I suppress that in any way through mistrust or some sort of impediment in the operation or the company that doesn't allow you to be those things that I just named, the system can't work, because you're not you. And we don't have role players. We have people who play roles and do things, but we don't ask them to play a role. We ask them to be the best they can be.
that absolutely resonates with everyone at school, and I'm watching all the faculty and staff that are here, and that's exactly the policy that we have at our school as well, to put people first. I mean, that's the most important thing, and I guess that explains to a great deal why our organizations resonate with each other so much. RC, can you talk a little bit about hugs and how is that connected to Enlightened Hospitality, and what is it, and so that everyone can understand?
Hugs the Employee Relief Fund, or Hugs?
The Employer Relief Fund, yeah.
So again, I'm going to give Patty a testimonial here in answering the question, but Patty used a phrase when she talked about the leadership moment that I just expressed for you. But when we immediately laid off, 95% of our workforce, Danny said, we need to be the best unemployer that ever existed, because this is our family. We can't continue to pay them, and we don't have a job for them, but they're still us. What can we do? And so Patty and her team did a number of things, but most importantly, they created a relief fund for people to use, company employees to submit an application to get funding during COVID. So we did an auction, we sold gift cards, but we, I think, at the end of the day, raised $2 million.
Yeah, 2.1.
$2.1 million to take care of people who may not ever work for us again, but they worked for us and today, and then the next day they didn't. They're still family, and that's the most important thing I think that Hugs does with us. It literally gives you a hug when you need it.
It's this philosophy of Enlightened Hospitality. It's one thing to philosophize when everything is going good, but when things go bad, when COVID hit us like a ton of bricks and devastated communities and livelihoods, that's when you get to know, when that proverbial rubber meets the road, or at least in our language, when the egg hits the frying pan. What do you do? And that's what I want to explore a little bit more, going back to March 2020. So what were some of the major decisions you were facing when you had to lay off so many people?
First was, how do we do it with dignity so that everyone gets the message at around the same time, and it doesn't turn into this, whisper down the lane, because we never wanted to do a Zoom termination, but we had to, because we wanted everyone to get the information from us in a transparent and direct way right away. So that was the first decision we made, is that we're not going to be able to get in front of people. People were scared to travel in the city. So we were direct and honest and said, this is what we have to do. And we did it. And then the second decision we made, which wasn't hard, when things are tough, I used to work with a guy named Ray who always said, when things are tough and you hit, the egg hits the frying pan, you fall on your values. So what are your values? Well, our values are people first. So we always wake up thinking like that. So this is just, how do you do that now? Because this is a mess that no one's ever dealt with. So we took care of them by keeping them. We did a job board. We did training where we could. We spent a lot of time in unemployment help, because I talked a little bit today in the legal class, the law class. People were waiting 24 hours on the phone to get into an unemployment person. So we decided very quickly, I'm sure you remember, RC, that we were going to let people go right away, no furlough, to give them the best chance to get first in line for unemployment. And it might have seemed opposite to what you want to do, but we thought, no, we don't know what's going to happen. We're not going to furlough you. Go get some unemployment. You'll make some money, and you'll take care of your family. Plus the hugs, we gave out $1.9 million of that money, up to $2,500 per former employee, and we gave it all away in that 9 months so that people could pay for rent or housing, bills, and food. And we're still giving money now to our teams if there's a fire in a house or whatever it is. It's a relief fund, but people want to help. They just need someone to tell them and make it easy. And I think our job was to make it easy.
And, you know, I've seen some extraordinary acts of hospitality and just general work, not only during the pandemic and afterwards, but in times of crisis. I think that's when our industry shines its brightest. I go back to 9/11 and how all of the people in our industry just started devoting themselves to care. Hurricane Sandy, when all the lights went out in New York, our industry figured out a way to do it. We're at our best often when our backs are pushed back. But you know, one of the things, just to stay with what Patty was saying, my relationship with Danny is sometimes advisor, and the way he likes things presented to him are in threes. I don't know why it's not two, I don't know why it's not one, but if you give him two graphic designs to choose one, he'll say, well, I need a third, because it's either this or that. So I remember March 13th or 14th, whenever, right before we had our big meeting, he said, help me get my mind around this. And that was my prompt to put three things. So I took a piece of paper and I did 3 columns. I said, every decision we are going to make going forward has to address people, cash, and our brand. We must always think of our people. We can't run out of money, and our brand needs to be as strong or stronger after this. And so everything that I started to look at, and I was able to sort of frame it that way. But what Patty and her team and the whole company have done, we're much stronger people-wise. We didn't run out of money. We're very judicious, and we have funds now to choose our paths. We're fortunate that we can choose a path. Many of our colleagues are not that fortunate. I feel terrible about that. And our brand, I believe, is still as strong in the marketplace and internally as it was before the pandemic.
That's a remarkable story and remarkable and very tragic times, but how you navigated those waters, and I really like the 3 things you've done. So I'm going to actually refer back to one of a very specific actions that USHG did before the pandemic, which is removing or thinking of tips in a different way. And so tell us what happened during that time. Why did you take that away? And then we'll come to, and at some point then we'll come to, then why did we put it back in?
I'm going to let Patty give you the nuts and bolts of it, because she's the real story here in terms of managing this. But I'll tell you, when we started the company in 1996, the first project we worked on was a crazy idea that Danny had called Hospitality Included. 1996, and I remember sitting in an office in Gramercy Tavern where our office was, and he said, now that we have a company, because we had 2 restaurants and we made them into one, he said, we need to eliminate tipping. We need to do like they do in Europe. And he said, we've got to do this. This is how we're going to go in the future. And we set out to do that. So over the course of about 3 months in 1996, we came up with a plan to do what we ultimately did. And I remember the moment where we were just polishing up the press release, where we were going to tell everybody in the media what we're doing and why we're doing it. And we had a controller back then who sounded a lot like Woody Allen. And I remember him coming in and he said, I'll never forget it, he said, I think this is a great idea, but we're going to lose money and we'll probably go out of business if we do this. And we looked at each other and we're like, well, we can't go out of business, let's scrap this. And so it went away. And then in 2002, Danny said it's time to bring that idea back. And so we did the same exercise. And we didn't quite get to the press release, but we did get to the point where we were ready to launch it. And then our corporate controller brought in all sorts of analysis and said, this is great, but it's going to lose money. And same thing the original controller said, but in a different way with more analysis as to why. And we said, okay, well, we're not going to do this now. But then, I think it was 16 or so, Danny said, now's the time. And we had 2 strategies. We sat in a room and he said, I want to do this now, and the time is now. And it was prompted by something that happened with an HR meeting we had. Someone in HR came up to a whiteboard in the room we were with and wrote the number 216 on the wall, on the whiteboard, and said, "Do you know what that number is?" And we're like, "Tell us." That's the amount of open positions we have in our kitchens across our businesses. 216 open positions. And Danny said, "That's it. We're going to change the model right now." And that was the next day we set out to do that. And we had 2 plans drafted. One was called cold turkey, and one was called warm turkey. And we, being sort of the conservative company, and let's make sure everybody feels great, we said warm turkey is the way we have to do this. It can't be that bold. It's too much of a change. And Danny, being the leader he is, he said, we either do it all the way or we don't. And so that set out the journey of eliminating tipping in restaurants. But its original concept, or what really got Danny to the cold turkey, was changing the imbalance of wages for front of the house and back of the house based on a huge gap in being able to staff our restaurants. Now Patty can take you on the journey of how did it work, why didn't it continue, and where we are now.
So before you get started, I just want to say that this is something that Danny had been passionate since 96, 2001, and I wonder if the 2 controllers were related the first year. But so he had been passionate about this, and ultimately, 20 years later, he put into practice. Now, how did you go about setting to reverse that, and why?
During the pandemic, well, when I joined, HI is what we called it affectionately, was something that everyone was talking about. And I was very new in the company, so all I heard was HI this, HI that. What I did know is that it was 2019, and we hadn't completely rolled it out in every restaurant, 5 years later. So anyone that does compensation knows that you change your model every 3 years. The fact that we hadn't gotten it done meant that there was resistance or something stopping us from being 100% all in on this. And I looked at it, went and got some help from Peter Baumgarten in the Washington University in St. Louis, second-year master's students. They did this whole big study on all 5 stakeholders and HI. And what we found was the employees in the back of the house were doing better. There was no question. We had decreased the disparity between front and back. The front of the house felt like they were undermined because they weren't making the same amount of money, and there was a little bit of lack of transparency. If you were a high propensity tip earner, one of the best, you could go anywhere and make money. The lower sales making servers were doing really well because they could make money based on the whole week. So we were spreading tips across, or revenue share across the whole week. But most of all, the managers were trying to manage this. There wasn't a system that managed it well. It was very difficult to calculate, and there was just a lot of mud in terms of what it was, how you got paid here. So we started looking at it. We got some really good data, and then came COVID. And when we asked our people to go back to work, the first restaurant we reopened was in April, May of 2021, and it was daily provisions. So we were asking our team, and I said this morning to some of the people, remember what it was like when you were coming back from your grocery store? You were taking every egg out of the carton and you were wiping it down with a Clorox wipe, and everything had to be clean. We were asking our people with no vaccines to go out and serve in this industry. And by the way, if somebody gives you a $20 tip for making a cup of coffee, you have to say thank you, but no. And that wasn't on their side. So the impetus of COVID gave us this chance to start again with an employee value proposition that increased wages in the back of the house, gave them a higher revenue share so they're tied to the front of the house, and then give the employees in the front of the house a chance to bet on themselves and make great money based on what they do well. So our turnover is down, our prime costs are down, I'll just say double digits. And things are looking up for that, but we're really keeping an eye on it as we go through because the market drives the pay system. And this may not be the best system forever, but it's working today.
And back to Danny's 3 things the way he thinks. And if any of you have businesses in the future or now where you're thinking of implementing this, Danny's very clear. It has to work for 3 constituencies simultaneously: your staff, your guests, and your bottom line, your investors. And unless you can cover all 3 of those with a win, the system really can't work the way you need it to.
And transparent and simple matters. In HR, if people don't know what you're trying to do and it's not simple enough for somebody that might not speak English, might not read Spanish, might not get it, but they need to know, when am I going to get paid and is it going to be right? You have to be transparent and you have to be very simple. Not that our people are simple, but the message has to be clear and concise.
You know, one of the hallmarks of leadership is when you are committed and passionate about something and you do it. But if there is data analysis, new situations, you should also be prepared to walk away from that. And so it's just incredible that after 20 years of dedication to this idea, that Danny and all of you walked away from that, and people had the sort of the courage to go to Danny and say, okay, that was great, but we're going to change this, and something that was core to his philosophy and he was willing to change. I think that's just incredible. So
one story with that is, answering the question, what did you all do during the pandemic? Day 2, Danny said, we're going to use this time to go through every system in this company, and at the end of this, we're going to give people a better company to come back to. And again, my colleague here, being who she is, she said, is everything on the table? And he said, everything's on the table, which was her way of saying, including no tipping. She's always the diplomat, right? And she said, is everything on the table? And he said, if it will make us a better company, yes. That's when we started to do the analysis of, will this continue to work? And I don't look at it as failure, I look at it as an evolution. Right? The world changed and we needed to change with it for our people and our businesses. At the time we implemented it, we were prepared to march on with this, but the world gave us a chance to reassess based on adaptation.
And the next chapter is going to be, in New York, not allowed to share tips across the front and the back of the house. So if those laws change, we will probably change in accordance. There's only 2 places you can't share tips, front and back, and we operate in both, DC and New York. So we have our eye on it all the time, because making sure we're fair for everyone really, really matters to all of us, and especially Danny.
So thank you for bringing that out. There is that celebrated quote that Danny had, which talked about the boat taking it out of the water, dry docking it for a whole year, and then putting it back in. So with respect to that, since you had 1 year off, and for example, you have this report on diversity, inclusion, and belonging on your website. So Patty, can you tell us about what is that report, what actions have you taken, and where you're going with that?
Happy to. We're at the beginning of our journey, but we are definitely on a journey. In the beginning of the pandemic, we also had a lot going on in America. The Black Lives Matter started back in 2013, if you think that far back. We had George Floyd, we had all kinds of Breonna Taylor, things happening for our people in the city of New York and across America. And we had contacted a guy named Dr. James Pogue that helped us look at who we are in relation to race. And Danny, being the hospitality person that he is, had this sense that if something came up, perhaps it wasn't his job to call it out, because you don't want to offend your guests, you don't want to offend anyone. And we learned, James Pogue will tell you that he's going to poke you in the eye with a stick lovingly. So what he called the right kind of uncomfortable. And we spent a year, we're still consulting with him, looking and saying, what do we need to do? And we decided that we were non-racist, which is passive. But Danny decided, I want to be the LeBron James, is what he keeps saying, of this effort. And so we have decided to be actively anti-racist and to be out there on our platforms making that important, because that's where the world is right now. Like, you're either that or you're not. And so it comes out in everything we do. We set up 3 goals last year in 2021 coming out of pandemic. For me, it was 50, 60, and even, or equal. So 50% male, female. We didn't make it. We lost so many females in the pandemic, and we're struggling to get them back. 60% people of color is what we wanted, because that was the census in New York and DC from 2010, and we were trying to get there. And then equal pay for male and female in every position. So we're struggling with the male-female. We're at about 38% female right now. We are 70% people of color, which I'm excited that we have really embraced that. And we are equal pay, male and female. Now we just need to make sure everybody feels like they belong. Because it's okay getting in there, get to the dance, but are you dancing? So we have a lot of work to do on that. And so we're in our journey, but excited about continually asking ourselves what's next, what's more.
Yeah, one of the best things that I think that came out of our time during the pandemic was the time with James Pogue. And as a leader, you go through this sort of journey in your mind of, well, my intent has always been to be fair, and always, it can't be about me, it's other people, because I'm always open-minded. And what he instills in you is that it's happening on your watch. You're at the table where decisions can be made, and you can't say it's somebody else. You have to stand on your own 2 feet. It's all of us. And that was amazing. I grew as a human being from this training, and in a great way. Still continuing.
Yeah.
That's outstanding progress, and I'm just curious that since you're not able to attract enough women to your workforce, if that is not a reflection on the company but on the society, that with the pandemic we don't have enough childcare and the burden disproportionately falls on them, so they're not able to come back to work. RC, financial stability is key to any business, and so hospitality has been hit so hard. And so how have you re-engineered the company so that it is now on a better financial footing despite the pandemic?
One of the things I noted was Danny's proclamation to give people a better company to come back to. And so if you look at all the elements that would equal progress or a better company, the employee value proposition for wages, for sure, but I think two things have happened that have made it a better company right now. Efficiency. So efficiency translates directly to your bottom line. We found that, I don't know what the actual number is, but we were probably 10 or 20% heavy in labor, where more people or less people doing more was sort of our how do we do that and have everybody have a full plate every day and feel rewarded, but then pay them commensurate with that exceptional effort. The other thing we did, which I believe speaks directly to the bottom line, is we got rid of most of the dysfunction in our company. We defined clear driving lanes for people. We tried to eliminate all the roadblocks to decision making. We gave people the way I would explain it to people is, a lot of times with decision making, it wasn't a blocked door. It would be like driving a rotary in a town where you would be on a really nice speed, and then all of a sudden you'd have to go around here just to go over here. We did that with decision making. We did that with role clarity. And now we've changed a lot of that, and I believe that has actually activated people's optimism, because the amount of time that they would have to emotionally deal with the barriers where they'd want to get a decision done and it would go through this rotary. Now it's very clear, and I think we're finding people are more fulfilled with this, and we definitely are moving faster as a company.
I just want to bring out one point that RC said, which is when you create more efficiency, when you drop some of the actions, some of the processes that don't contribute to profitability, so that does increase the profitability, but he also then simultaneously mentioned increasing the compensation to people who are now producing much more. And I think that's one fact that a lot of companies forget. They want more out of their employees, but then they're not ready to pay. So this kind of goes with the Enlightened Hospitality philosophy. One question for you. We have this great resignation happening in the U.S., and there are different explanations at once. How is that impacting your company? And if you're able to, and I just heard that your turnover is not very high, then what do you do to keep that low?
Well, turnover is always higher than you want it. If you
Yes.
lose one person that you were in love with when you hired them, you don't want to lose them. So we have to make sure we're the place people want to work. We have to look inside. This isn't about an external problem, because at the same time we have the Great Resignation, we lost 10,000 restaurants in New York City. So there's 10,000 restaurant workers, or a group of workers, that need jobs. And while some people that, I laugh about the what do you call it, the bread starter, everyone's got their own, they were making their own bread, and I'm going to go work in North Carolina and do this. The people that live in New York City can't just get up and go somewhere. They got to work. So the people that work our restaurants are in the city. We just have to get them working for us and treat them as well as they can be treated, and take care of them. There are plenty of people. We've been working with the Small Business Services, the Human Resources Association, to take some of the people that were found homeless, were made homeless, that are in shelters now, and get them into our businesses, as well as our sister company, Shake Shack, our cousin company, and try and get people re-employed, especially those that are in the shelters. We're starting with this group of 400,000 people that have families in shelters, and Abe and his team have been working to get them through our population and try and get work for people.
And just one other thing with that. I think there are two things going on right now. I think there's the great reassessment, and out of that comes the great resignation. But I started to look at it a little differently, because our industry may be not plagued, but there's an acute resignation in our industry, but there are all these other industries out there that people are resigning from as well. So why not make our industry attractive to them? Because they're resigning over here, but let's offer them some compelling reason to come and join us, because just remember why you got into this business in the first place. We get joy out of bringing joy to others. You also get to serve some really good food and beverage to go along with that. But what a great career.
You got to work somewhere.
Yeah.
You have to work for us.
Well, we are all believers here, and we have a lot of young people who are entering this business, and so what words of advice do you have for them?
Work somewhere you're happy. You may not know what you want to do for 10 more years. I've said this to everyone I've met, but life is too short to work somewhere you don't want to work. So if you find yourself on the path and you're not sure, most people in your stage of life decide what they don't want to do more quickly than they decide what they do want to do. So if you find yourself in a place where you're not happy, find something else, even if it's your not real job. And know that this can be a career, and a really super rewarding one, where you just get more out of it than you ever put into it, and it's a great place to land if it's where your heart is. But have fun while you're working. Like our website shows us to be fine dining, and that's what we do, but we're goofballs. I think if you were in the office last week, RC walked around the whole day holding a basketball in his head. I don't know why. He's holding his brains in, but we're goofballs. We don't take ourselves too serious. We're very serious about what we do, but you gotta have fun. Like, life's too short to work in an icky job. So find your passion, give yourself time to do it, and have fun along the way.
Be curious, be patient, and be grateful. This is an industry of so many rich stories and opportunities, and be flexible. Today's closed door is another open one tomorrow. Patty's journey, my journey, I've got so many colleagues that thought they were headed right there, went over here, and a whole new world has opened up. And when I sat where you are right now, when I was at UNH, there weren't that many choices in what we do. There was chain restaurants and hotels, but there wasn't food tech. There wasn't, you could go to write for a magazine because you like food. There's so many opportunities out there that never existed before. Go and get it, and be good at it.
Thank you. I think on behalf of the school, I have to say that this has been so interesting and very informative and educative, and thank you so much for spending the time. And I'm looking forward to visiting the USHG headquarters. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back to Professor Lance for the concluding remarks.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Patty, Richard. Thank you for sharing these tales that I don't know how many companies would be so candid to share, how much we learn from it. And I think you just really exemplified why we study your company, why we read the book as part of our own classes, right? And to make the bold decisions, the hard ones, is where you learn the most. And by the way, I believe in the power of three. My class can attest to that, so I understand that. But to hear the strategy, to hear the thought processes, to hear the decision making, to be able to talk about it now, 2020 is always that quarterback role, but in real time, gosh, that's tough. I'm sure you had sleepless nights. I'm sure there were tears. It was just, you can't even imagine. But to see how it blossomed and how you turned it into lemonade.
COVID lemonade.
COVID lemonade, and just where it's going now. How inspiring, and thank you for sharing that with us, and how excited we are to see you in New York. And I invite everyone to join us in the lobby to get a chance to meet Richard and Patty and Abe and Erin and Denise and the team, and we'll see you in a couple weeks for the next lecture. So have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.